You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Welcome to the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Join Dylan and Max, both with experience in flight instruction, the airlines, and business aviation, as they talk to a variety of industry experts, share stories, and have a little fun along the way.
The 21.5 podcast is back. We came back a little early from vacation, Max, with heavy hearts.
Yeah, a lot going on. A lot going on in the industry.
For folks that haven't seen, there was a crash up in Truckee last week involving a Challenger. And obviously, most of you know I am a Challenger pilot, and so this one really hit close to home. And we just wanted to jump on. We weren't planning on doing a podcast this week, but we just wanted to kind of jump on and discuss some observations about what we saw and the reaction and what we saw on social media. And man, the world moves fast, and it's always really sobering when something like this happens. So I have never been to Truckee. I guess I should probably preface that first off. Have you ever been to Truckee?
A really long time ago. Well, I think that the best way to do this is to start off with the broad overview of what we know.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were flying a 605 from Coeur d'Alene to Truckee, and the weather was
smoky,
reduced
low
visibility.
Yep.
And they were flying a circling approach.
Yeah. We know that they were on the RNAV approach to 20 into Truckee.
Right, which is a 4,600 and change foot runway.
Right. And then they attempted to break off of that approach and then circle to the longer runway, which is how long? 7,000 feet. Yeah.
There's an approach straight into the runway that they were circling to.
Yes. So from what I read on Facebook from people that had landed just prior to them, getting the runway 11 approach took a lot of convincing from air traffic control. I'm not experienced in Truckee. Probably for some reason, it's for traffic flow and other reasons, there's an advantage for them to use a different runway. But another airplane that had landed before them said, hey, we took a lot of work for us to get the
and they landed via the straight in?
They did land via the approach on 11 instead. Yeah. So, and so it sounded like that was maybe an ATC preference to get them on a different runway there. So if we start listening to the audio, you can kind of get a little bit of a background here.
Tower November 605 Tango Romeo is with the Lumo inbound, and we are going to have to circle the runway 11 for runway length.
Challenger 605 Tango Romeo Truckee Tower, Roger, report the airport in sight. When you're breaking off the approach, you can either enter the downwind for 11, or you can enter a left downwind for 11, or go over the top left downwind for 29.
Appreciate it very much. Looking forward to seeing you guys.
All right, pause right there. That's the one where she said you can enter overhead and a left downwind for 29, which was actually prohibited.
Yeah.
On the approach. At the very bottom, there's a note. It says not authorized for Cat C south of runway 29 and east of runway 2, which is basically if you flew over the top, entered the left down, and that's what you would have done. Now, does the controller know what category the airplane is?
No,
but that's
something
that was brought up, and
we'll get to that. Yeah, very interesting.
605 Tango Romeo is making the right-hand turn. We've got runway 11 in sight.
Okay, basically, if you can't picture it, they're coming in at a 90-degree angle to the runway from the north, and then they'd be making a right-hand turn to
enter the left downwind for runway 11.
Yeah. River 5 Tango Romeo, Roger, runway 11 cleared to land, wind calm, not in sight.
Clear to land, 605 Tango Romeo.
And the circling minimums for category C is about 1,800 feet EGL, FYI.
I got you.
Truckee Tower, this is Scott.
Yes, ma'am.
We see that fire. Are we good to go?
Okay. That was really the last transmission we heard. It was from a different airplane about the fire of the crash, I believe that's correct. That might not...
and if you can listen to the rest of it, and it's really... But that's what people are talking about. And then the tower's basically like, stand by, everyone's hold on. And then
they shut the airport
down. That's it.
So I think from listening to the audio, you can understand what they were attempting to do. So I feel pretty comfortable kind of understanding what their intention was.
Okay, and then the other question I'm sure everybody has was, what was the weather at the time? And so the METAR, prior to them commencing the approach at the time, was wind 0905, 4 miles, broken at 2300, blah, 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 smoke. Remarks, visibility 3.5, variable 5, smoke. And then I think right after the airplane went down, it was winds 280 to 11, gusts 16, 4 miles of viz, broken at 23, smoke, and then the same remark with the visibility variable 3.5 to 5. And it says aircraft mishap in the remarks, which I've also never seen. But
right.
So in the visibility required for the circle at category C is 3 miles. And so I think the question a lot of people with the Challenger right now are asking is, was he legal to fly this approach? Let's start there.
Yeah, a lot of speculation on that. I want to bring up one more before we get into that. Read the wind one more time on the METAR, the 1945, the very first one, probably while they were flying.
0905.
0905. Okay, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like a big deal. Now, some posts of some other pilots online gave some more color to that. They said the winds were out of the north aloft at 20 knots. And I know this is hard if you're listening and not visualizing, but imagine if that other runway is basically kind of running more east-west. That wind out of the north is going to set you up on a base turn. It's going to set you up for an overshoot if you're aloft.
Okay. And the interesting thing, too, these two reports were 1 hour and 5 minutes apart, and the wind changed from 0905 to 280 at 11, gust 16.
Yeah. And
so it flipped around 180 degrees. But
again, I'm not a Truckee, I've never been in there, and it's been a while for you, but everything I've read online says the winds shift there, and they're crazy winds there.
Okay.
So keep that in mind. I think that wind aloft could have played a factor in this too, while you're trying to circle.
Well, and that might play a factor in the circle here when we talk a little bit later. But the other thing too, so there's been a lot of debate, and I think this is one of those things that's misunderstood in aviation. And the rule actually changed that I wasn't aware of until this whole thing happened. So, part of the purpose of this discussion is to bring light to things maybe we all aren't aware of. So the Challenger approach speed category, we'll sum it up. And we may dive into this more in depth later, but right now it's based on either 1.3 VSO at maximum landing weight or VREF at maximum landing weight, depending on when the airplane was certified.
Right. Okay.
That's it. It has nothing to do with additives for wind or what you're going to actually be circling at. The category is that. Period. End of sentence.
Yep. And that goes against what almost every Challenger pilot has been taught.
Exactly. And everybody's saying, oh, it's category D because we circle at these higher speeds and blah, blah. Now, what the regulation says is, in layman's terms, it says if you're going to actually circle at a speed higher than your speed that was used to determine your aircraft category, then you should increase the category to the appropriate level.
Right.
But the regulation used to say you must. So it used to be a regulatory nature where in this case, they would have been breaking the law previous to this regulation change, right? Now it says should. Were they legal? Yes. The rest of it is up to interpretation, right?
Oh, I think we'll get into this.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm just saying, let's set the stage.
Yeah.
What they were doing was legal because I think there was a lot of speculation that they were doing something illegal. They were not.
Right. So to continue with the narrative of the facts, they attempt the circle, they impact the ground prior to the runway, kind of on the base to final area.
Basically a dog leg.
It looks like a dog leg,
which is not being critical. We've all circled and done a dog leg.
Absolutely.
But that's where it was. It was a dog leg turn.
Sure. Now we're looking at the ADS-B data right now, which should be accurate because I've seen the pictures and it was on the golf course there. And that ADS-B data does look like it's on the golf course. And from what we can tell, looking at this, it does look like that it was overshot on centerline there. So it was south of centerline.
Yeah,
so,
pretty substantially.
Pretty substantially. So that's what we can see. That's kind of the facts. So here's what's interesting. There's so many resources available. Like we're talking about, we've got ADS-B data. We've got Ring doorbell videos people are posting. We've got FlightAware stuff. We've got the recording, the live ATC, which we got within an hour of it happening.
We heard from the guy that landed before him. On the internet, within a day.
And we had the pilot that was supposed to be flying the trip posted text messages about it and sharing information. So what's crazy is there's an insane amount of information available instantaneously,
Super
almost
fast. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And so now we have this situation on pilot social media where there's a lot of ammunition available, I would say, for people to look at and people to start speculating. And that's exactly what we saw happening on pilot social media. It is an immediate speculation of what happened.
So so you've read a lot more of it.
Yeah.
Let me ask, let me interview you. What's the overwhelming consensus on
regarding what they think happened?
Speculation.
Speculation of what happened is that during the circle, they probably overshot the runway, got too tight, and got themselves into a lost control of the airplane or lost situational awareness while they're fixating on the runway, trying to fix the overshoot.
Yep.
So that's what a lot of people think. I have yet to hear of anyone saying anything that had to do with any type of equipment failure.
Okay.
So everyone is kind of, throwing this on at the pilots.
Okay.
And that's, I think, where things really got off the rails because a pretty popular personality that has his own Facebook group, PJP, got on there right away and was extremely critical of the crew. And
well, not only that, didn't call them murderers. And
it was pretty
which
crazy.
Is just
and that elicited a very strong response from people. And it was. Man, it's just amazing how quickly the wildfire.
Oh, it's insane.
starts.
And the thing is, like we just said, there's so much information available so fast. But you know what? It certainly isn't all the information available for one. So just start there.
Yeah.
I mean, is it okay to take all the information that we have, which is quite a bit more than in years past, and discuss it professionally as pilots and say, hey, this is probably what happened based on what we're looking at? And it's sad and that, but to call people murderers and call these guys that have obviously, it's really easy to say that about people that have now no ability to defend themselves. And it's when pilots get carried away a lot of times with this stuff. And I think I've always tried really hard to say, listen, here's all the facts, but at the end of the day, we don't know what happened.
Yeah.
We're going to have to wait for the NTSB, who will then gather literally all the facts that are available and make a report. And I think that's kind of what we have to take as the gospel at the end of the day on these things. But man, there's a lot more respectful, professional way to go about this discussion than Jeff at PJP made. And that was just... And he got eaten alive for it, rightfully so. And he's run his mouth and done a bunch of crazy stuff before, and he just gets real carried away. Clearly,
and I mean, they named the pilots' names right away, and then but one of them was wrong, and then later on, and so one of them, it turned out the news article came out a few days later about one of the pilots. He was extremely experienced in the Challenger. At first it was like, oh, no one had any Challenger time. So I mean, it's just that's the problem is it's so hard to separate emotion from fact. Like it's one thing, like you read the METAR, okay? That's like, there's a lot of factual information available. We can look at the ADS-B track, but it's so easy then to jump into some other information that may not be as verifiable, but if everyone uses it as information that is occurred, then it's very easy to.
Well, that's social media as a whole, really, right?
Exactly. But see, here's the thing. In the future, unfortunately, when there is another accident, it's not like we aren't going to do this again, as a group. And there's going to be whatever information was available for this one, there'll be more next time because there's more Ring doorbells out there and there's more trackers and there's more everything. So it just seems like it's going to be harder and harder to resist at every accident when so much information becomes so readily available. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to spitball it and for us to talk about it in an intelligent, professional manner, but to immediately assign blame, like it's 100%, and then defame people that are dead. It's just
that's the line. Now, here I want to talk about this from a different perspective,
especially from a guy who's not a saint.
Yeah,
we'll just say, if you want to get on the, into the mix, read what everyone had to say. But it's just guys throwing pretty big stones in a glass house. Let's just say that.
So now on the flip side of this, I do think that, especially from my in my situation, I did need to stay pretty on top of what happened here, because it is an airplane that I'm involved in operating. And you know what? I knew I was going to be getting a call from my boss about this, and that's something that I think, if you're an airline pilot, you probably don't have to worry about so much. But in business aviation,
yeah, I got a story about that too.
Yeah. It's a big, I knew, I better at least understand, the facts and have the facts down, because I'm probably going to get a phone call in the next 24 hours. Like, hey, what happened? Is our airplane safe to fly? And so I got to kind of watch this in real time and see how it worked. And sure enough, I got a contact from the boss, and I tried to just share, hey, here's what we know, and this is what happened. But that's an interesting wrinkle for business aviation.
For
folks.
sure, yeah.
So jumping from what we saw on Facebook over to the discussion at Pro Pilot World, there was a big difference.
There always is.
A lot more factual information. And this is what I thought was so interesting about the discussion there, was that I learned a lot just from the first couple of hours after the crash that I just wasn't aware of. And like we mentioned about this circling stuff and the categories, for a long time, Challenger pilots have been taught, you circle at category D. And without getting too deep into the weeds, I had made a post about it on there saying Challenger typically circles at category D. And a lot of other Challenger pilots said, yeah. And then some said, actually, maybe not. And that discussion evolved into getting a great post from Rich Bull, who does a lot of the performance work with NBAA and the FAA and is involved in writing some of the interpretations about what happened. But essentially, we learned a ton. I learned that day we actually are a category C airplane and not D like we've been taught.
Yeah. And all you got to do is go back to your post and say, add should in there.
Yeah.
And then you're completely in line with everything.
Yeah, exactly. So my point is, there is a lot of great stuff to be gleaned from this that you can learn about. And if you want more information about what Rich is talking about and the changes in the categories, it's SAFO 12005, where they talk a lot about the change in the language and categories and that kind of stuff. Essentially, an airplane can only be in one category, like you talked about. But so points about that, and then other points about reading the approach plate, and then where it's legal to circle from and where it's not. And I'll tell you, that part of the discussion didn't get brought up until pages and pages and pages later, where people are going, wow, look at all these limitations. And it's just a good reminder of hey, are you looking at every note? Are you paying attention to all of the markings on the chart? And do you understand what they all mean? You know what I mean?
For sure. And the other thing too is that hasn't been considered yet is what happened leading up to the selection of this approach. Now, there was a straight in approach that should have got them low enough based on the weather and everything else but have we reviewed the NOTAMs? No.
Yeah. Do
we know why they didn't use that approach? We don't know yet. And maybe it was pressure. Maybe it wasn't a good reason, which pressure from ATC or whatever. Maybe there is an actual valid reason. The other thing too, I think, is everybody's always quick. Oh, Truckee, clear weather only, I'd never circle there, blah, 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 blah. That is probably, again, I'm not a real experienced Truckee person, but I am experienced in Telluride, and so I'll relate it to that. There's a circle, you can circle the runway 27 over the high terrain and things in Telluride. And, should, as a blanket policy, can you say, like a lot of the fractional operator stuff, no circling at 27? That's it, right? Now, and if you want to throw the blanket over the whole group, that's probably a smart thing to do. Now, are there people that operate out of there regularly, that train for that in the simulator, things like that probably can do it safely? Sure. Were these guys in that group in Truckee? We don't know, right?
Yeah.
So should everybody or someone like Dylan and I that don't go in there almost ever be circling in Truckee with those weather minimums? Probably not. If you operate in there and you know it like the back of your hand, and you've done it and you practice it and you have procedures, and can you do it safely? Maybe. So,
and that brings us back to one of the points of why we started this podcast in the beginning, is for Part 91 slackers like you and me. In a way, we don't you can do it.
You have more rope to hang yourself.
You have more rope to hang yourself in a way. And just because you can doesn't mean you should. I've read a lot of posts from people that are experienced in Truckee, and those people say Truckee should be up there with Aspen and Telluride, but people don't think about it that way. And hopefully that becomes a more, there's awareness into that airport. Now, I think again, I've never been in there. From what I read, it seems like it's more of a wind thing a lot of times than a terrain thing. There is terrain, but it's the wind that can really mess you up. But I hope maybe people will start practicing going into the sim there with, some wind shear and some other weird.
And that's the thing. When these accidents happen, at this point, the only thing you can do and the best thing you do is try and learn from it.
Yeah.
Right. Which we're all doing. I already have.
Yeah.
And so, but I guess at the end of the day, between you and I, when we look at this and the facts that are available and the data and the ground tracks and ADSB and everything else, it would appear that the guys didn't execute the maneuver from base to final properly. And it looks like they overshot, they doglegged it, overshot, and maybe became fixated on the runway, let the nose drop. Who knows? They were low altitude. They were pretty close from a distance on final thing and probably messed up and crashed.
Could be. It kind of signs are pointing towards that. I will say I could get on a stump, and a lot of people did, like circling approaches. It just seems like it's getting we're getting less and less proficient in them because we have better in technology, right? So there's more runways have straight ins. Every year, we're getting more RNAV approaches into runways, which is decreasing the amount of circles we need to do because there's more straight-in approaches is a good thing. But these circles, I mean, gosh, how often are you going to really do it? You know what I mean?
There's a couple things. In this specific situation, this was more of a visual approach than a circle. And I say that because the circling minimums were at 1,800 feet AGL. So you could have just been called the field in sight and been executing the left downwind for it wasn't a 400-foot AGL circle like you've done in the simulator or whatever, right?
But I guess my point is it's a non-normal approach.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
For sure. And the problem is we don't train for it
exactly
realistically. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Turn
That's my
here,
point.
Start a timer for 30 seconds. I mean, you guys have all done it. And you know, it's...
So that's what I think, like these circling approaches is really tricky. And we're getting, in my opinion, at least in my experience, we're getting less proficient doing them.
Absolutely. And I think, especially if you're a Part 91 and you go to training and I find myself having plenty of time to do whatever we want in the simulator.
That's because you fail and then you have a whole extra week.
That's all the extra training. But utilize that time. And I'll be the first one to say, I used to say, all right, well, we got like an extra hour here. Do you guys want to do anything? I'm like, nope, let's go.
Yeah.
And get out of there. And now I utilize it to do stuff. And, and I tell you, one of the things I will be doing is probably this approach. And then probably another circle somewhere else that we haven't been to and we haven't studied and don't have the timing on all lined up and all the nonsense.
Here's a great
especially because too, you couldn't just do that in a G3 sim.
Yeah.
Because the visuals were trash but now in these new sims that utilize Google Earth,
you can't. I mean, here's a circle that most people in business aviation have to deal with all the time is the circles you got to do at Teterboro, which like that'd be a good one to certify. It's like we could practice that one because I think the wind is one of those things, and the wind is a huge factor, and then the other factor, and this is what I got out of the upset recovery training, which I think is a excellent mitigation tool for some of this stuff. Understanding accelerated stalls. And understanding that an airplane, the G loading plays a big part in all of this, and overshooting because there's wind. I mean, look, if you're circling, it's probably a weird wind to begin with. So you've got to understand all of that. You're already doing a maneuver you're not familiar with. Then you're probably accounting for a weird wind, and you're probably lower than you normally are. So there's all these extra factors, and then there's some aerodynamic components in there too. So there's a lot to understand. So would it be cool on another circle if you fly an airplane with an AOA gauge? Pay attention to that when you're maneuvering, like some other things I think you could get out of a sim session, maybe that they could really give you some value.
For sure. And then for the other air carriers and things like that, a lot of times there's not the time to train like that. And so, but that's when they give the big blanket, no circling policy or the VFR circling minimums. The circle, you have to have, VFR weather. So that's another way around it. Now, again, my opinion as Part 91, and you're given that rope, but you also, that has responsibility. Like a lot more of the decision making is being put on you as the individual pilot in control of that operation or that flight specifically under Part 91. And that's where if you want to do those things, I think you have to put the extra effort in to train properly, or don't do them.
This leads me to my last point, right? When we look at professionalism and we look in business aviation, especially, there's always, can you tell, the boss is going to want you to do something that you don't think is safe. And can you tell him no? And, I think that's a kind of a cliche in a way, because I don't think from my experience, that doesn't happen that often. And it's not that hard to say no to the boss for most people. But here's who is hard to say no to is yourself, because I'm guessing that when they were doing that approach and then they're like, we're going to have to circle here. The boss wasn't in the back going, oh, make sure you circle and do it. You know what I mean? It's you, the pilot, who are going, oh, we got to circle. We got to do this. I'm placing this pressure on us to get into Truckee instead of diverting to Reno. It's probably not, it may not, this is just speculation. I'm guessing it's not the guy in the back a lot of times.
Oh, and there could be, external factors. I don't even know if these guys were based there. It could have been his kid's birthday party that night. Yeah. I mean, I remember landing, and I would go on these trips to Aspen or Telluride, and the weather would be crummy. And I personally was extremely motivated to land at the airport of intended landing, because I had stuff going on. It was going to snow tonight. I wanted to ski in the morning. Yeah. This and that. And I remember consciously having to put myself in check and be like, you have to focus on the mission, make decisions based on that. And everything else
to be in it.
And so, and I remember having to consciously think about that and not force myself. I just had to think about it and realize the position I had put myself in. Yep. And then make decisions based on me being the pilot, not Max snowboarding in the morning.
Exactly.
And so going back to what you said and your boss calling you. So I was at this thing, I'll say, last weekend, and I was there with the guy I fly for, and there was basically, I came down and it was myself and my co-pilot came down, and there's 4 guys that were sitting at this table. All 4 of them own airplanes. And I said, hey, thanks for having us. We were just kind of saying goodnight because we were leaving. Yeah. And they said, so do you have any inside information on that Truckee crash? And I said, I don't have any inside information. I have information that is what is available to anybody. Well, what do you think happened? And I said, I don't know what happened, and we won't know maybe ever, but our best chance is when the TSB comes out with a report, and that's going to take some time. I said, can we speculate based on the information that's available? Sure. And I can tell you that, and kind of basically laid out what we'd already discussed just now, right? And said, it was probably this. I don't really know. We'll find out later. And the guy, kind of the leader of this group of 4, is like, for myself and any of these guys, we never have to be anywhere that's that important. He's like, so if you ever, we don't want you to push it from a safety thing, and we can wait, or we can go to another airport and this and that. And I said, look, you don't have to worry about that with me. I have a wife and 3 kids I need to get home to, and I make sure that always happens. And I make decisions to keep everybody safe, myself included, yada, yada. I said, you know what, though? I do want to tell you, I appreciate your attitude. And every owner of the airplane should say that to their pilots at some point. Yeah. Because there are the owners that we all talk about that probably doesn't happen as often as we like to think. But there are guys, and we have heard stories firsthand, that push people into doing things. And I said, but that still is on the pilot to be strong enough to stand up and do what's right. And if that means going to the other side of the airport and buying an airline ticket home and turning in your company ID, that's always an option. It's better than dying. And so it was interesting, though, to have this discussion with 4 guys all in one spot
that all have airplanes and
that all have airplanes and about this thing that's fresh in everyone's mind. And it was just, it was interesting. And then at the end he goes, well, good. I'm glad and everyone's like, oh, nod their heads. And it was just kind of this thing. But I think your point is really valid, though, that more often than not, it's probably the pilot. Because you don't want to go to the airport basically is admitting you failed and you couldn't, that's what people think in the back of their mind. Yep. And these guys, having gone to Reno instead and landed, would have certainly not been a failure.
Right. And so I've been in that situation before. Told the guy, hey, we're going to a different airport. And it was really a really good experience for me because he goes, oh, man. And then we landed at the other airport and he gets in his SUV and off he goes. And like, he's
Yeah.
delayed 10 minutes. Like, what's it? And that was really eye opening for me. It was a good experience to just be like, nah, I stuck to my guns and didn't. But I was certainly thinking about putting pressure on me and thinking like, oh man, I'm not going to deliver, you know, and that kind of stuff. So there's definitely a lot of,
and I think the thing
internal.
that adds to that or plants that seed is when other people are getting in.
Sure.
That's the hard part. Cause then you're like, well, why are they getting in and I can't, why I should go, you know, and that's what I mean. You just don't know that guy, that crew may do that all the time, or they may have approved for lower than standard minimums at Telluride or Aspen, or you just don't know. And it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Just like your mom says, just because your friend jumps off a bridge, are you going to? I mean, it's the same thing.
It's very
Worry
true.
about yourself and make the decision that you can with a level head.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad we came back from vacation, wanted to just discuss this while this was fresh in everybody's head. I mean, it's just crazy to see how quickly speculation can spread and how quickly the information can flow out there. And it's only going to get easier in the future. So thought we'd share our perspective on that. And, you know, I think this discussion on the category stuff and some of the other technical discussion, I'd be curious to hear from our listeners if you guys want us to explore this a little bit more. We're always hesitant in a podcast to try and especially discuss things that might be visual, but I think it would be really important. So if that kind of stuff interests you, definitely let us know. Shoot us an email.
Or if anybody's a frequent Truckee operator, that obviously we are not, we would love to hear and talk to somebody
Absolutely.
that can put some more color on it.
Absolutely.
I think the one thing you brushed over, but just really quick, is that this is another instance where that loss of control and extreme attitude recovery training is so valuable.
Yep.
That
from understanding aerodynamics, I think especially in that circle, the accelerated stall stuff. Now I know we got shakers and pushers and a lot of things to help you, but it's amazing.
Or distract you when you're 300 feet above the ground.
Right,
you know,
exactly.
A lot of things like that too. So
yep. Yeah. It's amazing how quickly you can stall an airplane at a speed you don't think the airplane's going to stall if you're trying to do
this
so much.
Might be a good time to make the approach to the principal for the training.
Absolutely. Okay, so like we said, we were on vacation. We weren't planning on doing a show, but we did. Why don't you fill us in on what you've been doing on your vacation? Because it's probably more interesting than what I was up to.
I don't know about that. Yeah, I've had a crazy just the last week and a half, really.
Well, I'm just talking about in general.
Do you want me to start at the beginning?
No.
Or?
The thing that's probably interesting to our listeners.
I was on fire with craps in Vegas. No. That's another story. But no, we went to Oshkosh AirVenture, and I had originally planned on going longer, and things with the schedule didn't work out. But I ended up going for 2 full days at the show, and that's my first time ever going, and it was awesome. Now, from the perspective of myself, who's been building an airplane, putting a lot of time and effort and money into all of this, and I'm really into that stuff. Yeah. And 2 days was not enough. 2 days could be plenty for a lot of people. I really want to go to the seminars and do all this stuff. My poor wife, I'm like, she was like, well, so what are we doing? I'm like, well, there's this seminar on dynamic prop balancing I'd like to attend. And so she's sitting.
Did she actually go with you?
Yeah. And she still was like, no, it's fine. It's totally cool. And the best part is we were there on our birthday, which is the same day.
Oh, yeah, you guys share a birthday.
Yeah,
that's right.
So it's like, here's your birthday trip, honey.
There you go, honey.
But anyway, it was incredible. And there's just so much stuff from all different of static display of airplanes to vendors and all of these halls and the amount of seminars they conduct every day is mind-boggling. So, okay, you're a home builder. That makes a lot of sense. You're a home built aircraft. What if I'm just a professional pilot? Okay. You think are you into or not into general aviation? Let's say I'm not really into GA. Is there value in there from networking and job stuff? Would you justify going if you're just a dude? From purely to advance your career? Yeah. Probably not. I mean, there's always, but that being said, United had a 737 MAX there.
Mhm.
and it was kind of gone. UPS brought a
SkyWest was there. I saw.
SkyWest,
Yeah.
UPS brought in a 747-800 that was like 3 weeks old, which was actually really interesting.
Yeah.
So could you? I didn't even look at it from that perspective, honestly. So there could be value. I don't know the answer to that question. I'd have to look at it. But even in all like the vendor halls and stuff, I didn't see like United and Delta have a booth.
Right.
So
I think some airlines were there. I think the way you angle that, if you are going to use it, is if you have one of those interests that you're really into. Maybe you do attend the prop balancing seminar or some other, fabric, working or whatever, and then you meet the people in there, and then, oh yeah, by the way, I'm a pilot for so and so. Like most of these people are probably in the industry.
yeah, for just a pure networking with a bunch of other pilots.
And you'd have to would approach it pretty strategically, and I would think have an interest or something that you were already aligned in, and then. But I do think there could be value there.
There certainly could.
So I was just curious from that angle because I went like 10 years ago, and I was there for one day, so it was a whirlwind,
Yeah, it's just crazy. So one of the things we did, we went on a Ford Tri-Motor ride, and we went there, and it's kind of groups, and you figure out what group you're in, and they give you a time, and you kind of come back. And so the group ahead of us was a lady and her husband. They were in their mid 90s, and had lived in Oshkosh, Wisconsin their entire lives, and had never flown on an airplane.
Really?
Yeah. And so this was a 1928 Ford Tri-Motor that they were operating and giving rides in. So they were in the group ahead of us, and we were like, oh yeah, it's their first airplane ride. And they took pictures, and this cute old couple, and it was like their grandkids, and it was the whole thing. And then I read the article about it like a week later that came in the email, and it was just to see stuff like that there beyond all the airplanes and all the stuff you just don't see. And while that's clearly a stroke of luck that I happened to be there for that, that was just something that I thought was really neat to see. I mean, they could have flown on that airplane when it was actually in service. And so that was cool. And then we taxi out right as like the air show starts at like 2:30 every day. And there's an air show every day. And it's a legitimate air show.
Right.
Like
it's super cool.
Every day is legit. And we're taxiing out. We taxi the runway, and then they have us taxi all the way back. And I don't know exactly what was going on because I didn't hear ATC, but we taxi all the way back. And then we go to this other runway because they're using the main runway for the air show. And we're holding short of this area. And this absolute circus of World War II airplanes comes out, which is like between 10 and 20 of every type of T-28s, T-6s, Yak 52s, like all these airplanes come and are departing. I mean, literally over 100 airplanes while we're sitting there just holding short, departing in formations of two. And then finally we do our little 10-minute ride. We come back and we're watching the air show, and it's an absolute circus of all these airplanes in formation, crisscrossing, and then P-51s dive bombing and blowing stuff up, and a P-51, and then just an F-4U, and then there's a formation of C-47s comes over, and the missing man. You're just like, everywhere you look, you're like, oh my god, it's insane. And then the Red Bull helicopter shows up with the guy doing barrel rolls over the helicopters. They're doing loops, and you're just like, what is going? It's really incredible.
Okay, last thing on Oshkosh. If you remember back in episode 55, we talked to Justine Harrison, general counsel for AOPA. She told us about kind of the warbird situation with the flight instruction and all this. The administrator, Mr. Dickinson, actually went to EAA AirVenture. You sent me this link here because you're kind of involved in this. But if you don't remember, basically there was that Warbird Adventures thing, and then there was a ruling that said you can't provide flight instruction in like limited category aircraft, and then it ended up this legal interpretation also spilled over into experimental aircraft, right? And then it basically turned out that you have to get this a LODA, which is like a letter of
deviation
to instruct in these airplanes, and AOPA and other alphabet groups were trying to fight it. And turned out the administrator came and addressed it. And what did he say? I mean,
I didn't see it. I just read the article the same as you. But he just basically says, yeah, we kind of screwed up, and there's changes in the works to fix it. And that was what initially said.
Yeah.
And the email a couple days later, it clarified the changes are going to take about 4 years.
4 years to fix. She goes, yeah, we'll fix the language.
And they'll fix it and whatever. But what's funny is that, do you remember when commercial drone operations first started?
Yeah.
And basically you had to apply for a deviation from existing regulation.
Yeah.
And then they came out with the whole drone pilot certification and all of that, right? Because remember I did that whole thing? And that's essentially the situation. Oh, we did that. So for right now, all we can offer you, and it sounds like they're pretty...
They know what the problem is.
They're not going to make it real hard to get if you have a good reason. But it's funny when you read that in the way that it was in that article. It's kind of like, it'll just be just 4 years.
Just 4 more years, we'll have this all. We know it's a problem. And you're
wow.
just like, wow, bureaucracy. So anyways, I emailed Justine Harrison again, and I said, hey, you have any thoughts on this? And she said, the 4-year timeline quoted by Administrator Dickinson is exactly why we need legislation pending in the House and Senate to pass. House Bill 4645 and Senate Bill 2458. Codify what the FAA said for decades until its recent reversal. Payment for flight instruction is not payment for carrying persons or property. The legislation requires the FAA to update their rules within 180 days of passage. Waiting 4+ years to fix a safety issue is unacceptable. AOPA urges pilots to call their representatives and senators in Congress and ask them to pass the Certainty for General Aviation Pilot Act of 2021 without delay. I will post the numbers for those bills in the show notes, so if you can look it up and check that bill out for yourself and see. But it sounds like that would be very advantageous to encourage our elected officials to take a look at that.
Yeah, and I agree. And so we all think it's kind of this funny blunder that the FAA made, but it really does affect safety, because here's the thing. These rules sometimes are designed to enhance safety, and sometimes they're a real impediment to it. Like this whole, when we had Justine on, remember we talked about the advisory circular that they finally issued where you could fly with another pilot during your flight test phase. And it's a lot of steps and all this stuff. But certainly people that probably shouldn't have been taking airplanes up by themselves and probably had mishaps were affected by that. Yeah. And now that they have the ability to do that, myself personally, so I'm about to have my airplane inspected for its airworthiness certificate, and I have to go take it flying for the first time.
Yeah.
It would be great to go take flight instruction if there was an airplane of the same type available that I could, but right now I couldn't just go do that. I have to go get, now is there a pathway to do it legally? Sure. But is that an obstacle to doing it? Absolutely.
Yeah. One of my favorite sayings from a chief pilot in years past was, when the weight of the paperwork is equal to that of the airplane, then it is time to go fly.
I've never heard that.
Pretty much. All right. Let's look at the mailbag. We've actually got some stuff in here. The mailbag, of course, is brought to you by our friends at the Advanced Aircrew Academy, where they offer training, online training for flight departments, business aviation operators. If you're a flight department manager and you want to mix things up a little bit, maybe get off the old computer-based training that many of us are familiar with and go to a new, fresh platform, check it out. Aircrewacademy.com. Their subject matter experts are very knowledgeable in many facets. I was just contemplating what our next podcast with them is going to be, because they lend out their subject matter experts to us. What were you you have any ideas? I had one.
Circling?
I wonder if they have a module on that. Maybe they do. I don't know. I was thinking, like, it's a little late in the game, but I was still thinking weather radar would be a good one.
That would be a good one.
Watching dudes point the tilt.
That's just one thing that you've never really given a course in.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to seek that one out.
There certainly experience is important in operation of the weather radar, but certainly some theory could help.
Exactly. So if you've got a topic you want to hear us book and discuss with them, let us know. info@215podcast.com. We'll have some more expertise from our friends at the Advanced Aircrew Academy coming up. Check them out, aircrewacademy.com. All right. Great news. We have reviews to read.
Oh, boy.
Here you go. Oh, wait. Let me make them bigger. Not the reviews, just the font. I'll make them like 7 paragraphs long. All right, go ahead.
Epically awesome interviews. These guys have awesome chemistry and are engaging and fun to listen to while pre-flighting the jet or cleaning the hangar floor. They also have a killer guest list with interviews that cover tons of highly useful and applicable topics that professional pilots can relate to and often really need to hear. I've personally used at least 2 of the companies with 21.5 representation in my own flight department simply due to their interviews on the show.
Wow.
Keep up the great work, guys. JJ Capuro. Thanks. That's anybody that's looking to support the show. This is a resounding endorsement.
Yeah, this is great. Next one says crew room humor. If you're like me, flying down the 303 in the Tesla at 3 a.m. on the way to Scottsdale and have nothing to do. Dylan, he misspells my name like several different ways. Dylan and Max are a great way to pass the time on your commute to work. Fun shop talk with good information for pilots. More PSAs. They are hilarious. That's the one with the piano music.
Oh.
Do you remember that one? Nope, not that one.
Definitely not that one. That one's been put back in the vault for now.
I need a PSA on my PSA.
You're no Fred.
Yeah, I'm going to have to work on that one. All right, we'll work on a PSA here sometime soon. And great news, donations. Another tumbler has been sold. I've got one left.
How many did we start with?
Yeah. Well,
I don't even have one of those.
Shout out to Michael R. Well, if you want one, Max, all you need to do is go to our website, 215podcast.com, scroll to the bottom, push the donate link, send us at least $85, and we'll send you
all right, I'll tell you what.
a tumbler.
I'm not going to snipe the last tumbler.
Yeah.
But when somebody does and we reorder,
we're going to reorder.
I want one.
You want one. Okay. And then do you want to talk about our next product or you want to keep that under wraps still?
No, I don't think I'm not ready to.
You're not ready. Okay. Well, we have
it's too powerful.
Yeah. We'll have that coming up. All right, mailbag. Hey guys, discovered your show recently, and the first episode I listened to was about full-time contract flying. I'm a young, low-time pilot currently working as an SIC at the sim at Flight Safety, where I am always trying to make connections and get myself a contract trip. So that episode was especially interesting for me. It also got me thinking about other less well-known types of flying. Any chance you guys could do a future episode with an air show pilot or an Alaska bush pilot? I think anything like that could be really interesting. Love the show. You guys are the best. Thanks, Chris. Well, I have good news for you, Chris. We already did a show with a Alaska bush pilot. Her name was Liz, and it's in episode 41. And you can go track that one down. And she did a really good job of explaining kind of like the real situation.
Yeah, I think that's the most common Alaska bush pilot.
Yeah.
Would I love to talk to somebody that flies a Super Cub or a 185 and lands on gravel bars and picks up moose hunters? Yes.
That'd be awesome. Is that like a realistic scenario for your average Joe CFI in Texas who wants to go adventure?
Sure.
Probably not.
Right.
So Liz kind of does a really good job in episode 41 of laying that out. So go check that out, Chris, and thanks for the email. Appreciate you writing in. I think you're on the right path with the networking there in the Sim Center. That's a good situation to be in. Okay. Flight advice, Max. I have some flight advice for all of our listeners first. And that's to head over to harveywatt.com and check out all of the products that they offer.
That's the best advice we've ever got on the show.
That's right. Here. And we do it every single episode. Life insurance, loss of medical insurance. Are you covered? You know, after seeing all of the craziness that can happen in our profession, the smart thing to do is to make sure that you and your family members are protected. HarveyWatt.com has all of the products professional pilots need.
We are not only just endorsers of the product, we are customers.
That's right. Okay, flight advice. Hey team, my name is Dimitri. I am a freshman flight instructor at UND. I started listening to your podcast only a few months ago and have really enjoyed every episode since. Real news with real insight from professionals such as yourselves make this show a legitimate resource for understanding current events covering most aviation sectors. A quick question with probably an extensive answer. My current plan is to flight instruct until some random hours mark. I want to experience everything in aviation, commercial transport, private sector, management, time in a Piaggio, anything. But I have very little insight or resources being stuck in the middle of nowhere. Ooh. Shout out to UND. Airlines are here all the time talking about flow programs to the mainline, which is great, but I am not interested in settling at mainline right now. How can someone like myself with low time, which will change over the next 6 months, build connections remotely with private individuals and possibly secure single or multi-corporate gigs that will guarantee I can log time in as many airframes as possible? No relationship commitments, and I am more than happy to move out of the Midwest. I'm originally from Northern California. Thanks. Keep up the good work. Su ya ya. I guess that's a saying for UND people. I don't know.
No.
The second best aviation university in the country. All right, Dimitri. Your head is in the right place because this is exactly what you and I have talked about this before. When you're young and single, this is the time to go do the adventurous, fun flying jobs because the mainline jobs will always be out there.
Yes.
At a later date. So I guess the question is, how can he set himself up to do this now while he's stuck in the middle of North Dakota?
Yeah, that's going to be the toughest transition, I think.
Yeah, that first job will be tricky. Okay, so if you have not heard the episodes with James O'Neill talking about networking via LinkedIn, those I would go back and listen to. Right now, when you're in North Dakota, LinkedIn is going to be your primary tool to start planting the seeds. So starting to identify some of those kind of adventure jobs right now will be good. I think making it very clear that on your profile and other things, noting like, I'm up for excitement. I'm not looking for the, typical, flight instructor regional airline path. Kind of getting that stuff out there and associating that with your profile, I think will be helpful too right now.
Yeah. And beyond just LinkedIn, the Facebook groups, Pro Pilot World, all of those remote networking avenues is where you need to be right now. And Dylan, that's a great point too. Make sure knowing that you're not, I'm just trying to get a regional job and then move on to whoever, that you're looking for something different. Yeah. Because that's what people that are looking to hire somebody are looking for.
Yeah. Most of those people like hiring an air attack pilot for fire. You know what I mean? When they're looking and seeing those people that are out there, they're going to want to make sure this isn't the person that's just going to jump ship here, when they hit 1,500 hours or whatever. That would be another one. The aerial firefighting, I think, would be really cool. And there are entry-level jobs available for that. Flying the air attack and the other lead planes and stuff like that. So I think you're on the right track. Focus in, advertise your brand, really, is what we're saying, Adventure Man. I'm excited for you.
Yeah, that is cool. Stay in touch. Let us know where you fall.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to do it for our kind of... Oops. Really struggled.
Was that supposed to be the thing?
That was supposed to be the ending music, but it was the furlough flute. I did not mean to play that. Yeah. Steer clear of that, Dimitri.
You are rusty.
I know. We're so rusty. We were supposed to be on vacation. We did have a good vacation.
Good run.
It's good to be back. Thanks to all of our listeners for the support, emails, donations, reviews, etc. We couldn't do it without you. 215podcast.com is the website, and you can contact us there on the socials at 215podcast. And here's a little, if you're in the Phoenix area, follow our social media. We're actually going to do a little Pilots Happy Hour.
Oh, that's right.
Mid-August.
Next week,
so
right?
we will announce that on our social media. You can come buy Max and I beers. It'll be great.
It'll be great.
Yeah. Of course, we'd like to thank both of our sponsors, Harvey Watt Insurance, harveywatt.com, and our friends over at Advanced Aircrew Academy, aircrewacademy.com. We'll have another episode for you in a couple of weeks, but until then, remember,
flexibility is the key to air power. See you, everybody.
See you guys.
On guard.
The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.